So first of all, a few tips that will help you to work with Photoshop in the future. Whenever I'm working on an image that has a lot of bright pixels in it, like a high key background like this one, for example, I always change also my Photoshop workspace environment. And you probably know already that when you work in Photoshop, that your room should also be in the same way, that you're working somewhere where you have neutral colors, where it's not too bright and not too dark, and that you don't get any weird, funky color effect on your screen or sunlight or any glare. So obviously your room itself has to be already in a neutral colored temperature. But also it's important that you do the same thing in Photoshop itself. So I'm working here with Adobe Photoshop CC 2017, where I think that this is the color when you ever open up Photoshop for the first time. I think it's now this dark gray. And if you work with an older version, then it might still be this light gray. And as you've seen, you could also change it now to a dark gray or even to black. So that's already kind of the Photoshop by default, that they say, okay, I think you might likely want to change it into this kind of dark gray or even black. But the problem is when you work now on a white image, you don't really know if it's white. So especially if you would work now on this black background here, then you don't really see the issues. So if the client or your customer goes now and wants to print this image or has this image maybe in a frame that has a white border, then to you that maybe looks white, and you could even check your histogram. And then you see, okay, there's also a lot of white here, maybe that's okay. And then you would just, send the client away and they print it, and then they see, actually, because if you would imagine now a white border, then you see this is not white. So obviously if you check your histogram and you know how to use it, you can also now press here with the Alt button and change this, and you will see when is the moment that it comes, the moment when it's red, then it's white here. So you can change it here, but even now you could probably see, although I have now my white point, even if I drag this, it's still, I think now we're getting there. So with the white border around, or with your white workspace, now it's a lot easier for you to see when the image is gray or still a bit muddy, and when does it start to get white. So I think that's a really good indicator, therefore, if, your client goes and puts it into a white frame, that this is actually a white image that you present them. So if you have now a dark image, so let's say you want to work on this one, then obviously I wouldn't recommend to be on white, because now you might be like, oh gosh, this is now completely dark. And then I would just go back with the right mouse click, and then you just say, okay, maybe you want now even to work on black, because the same rule might apply as we just did with a white image. Maybe now with a dark background, you could also see, oh, I thought this was dark, but actually there's still a lot of light information in the shadow. And then you could do the same thing. You could just go in there with your histogram here with the levels, and with Alt again, you could just press that down, and then you could just really darken this, if that was the idea for the image, of course. So I think the background, that's the first tip for me. That's, I think, very important, because that will really give you a good indication if your image has a good color. So, like for the white image, you go for the white background with the right mouse click. With the black or dark image, you could go to the black frame. And now with this one, again, with the mouse click, with the right mouse click, you could just say, okay, with this I want to work maybe on a medium gray, and that just gives me the best idea for the image. Or you could change it into a complete different color. Maybe you're working on a paper that's purple or blue and so on. And then you could also just go into your select custom color, and then you could just change it. So I always have it up here because I find it most useful to see if I'm working on a true white. But you could just also click here in blue or purple or whatever, and then you just change it if you think maybe this might be useful for you. Yeah, so that's a very easy tip on how you can just change these backgrounds, and I think that will just save you a lot of time in the future.